that smell like an upset. Rams, Seattle's offense is bleeding. Nobody can figure it out. Jamal Adams and the Rams are now. Akers is back. Cooper Kupp is back. Andrew Whitworth is back. That's the first. The second is Tom Brady on the road in the playoffs is 2-4 in his last 6, and Washington's defensive line is going to make him at least partially uncomfortable. I think that game could get really ugly. So those kind of feel like, I just don't see the Bears beating the Saints. Is there an upset that you kind of feel like is possible?
Those are the two for me, really, Colin, the ones that you mentioned. I actually picked the Rams to beat the Seahawks for a lot of the same reasons you mentioned there. I like Sean McVay on the stage. I like the fact that he's making Pete Carroll prepare for two very different quarterbacks. I just think the Rams are ready to perform on that stage. And again, I think a lot of times in the playoffs, having premier players like Aaron Donald, like Jalen Ramsey really helps. And I don't even regard that as that much of an upset. Obviously, Washington beating Tampa on Saturday night would be massive. I just give you this tidbit. The formula to beat Tom Brady in the playoffs, almost invariably, and this is regardless of last year, his team wasn't as good, right? Brady's team was not as good last year. But if you go past that, almost every time, whether it was the Ravens or the Giants, the formula to beat Tom Brady in the playoffs is to get to the quarterback with 4 guys. What's the one thing that Washington can do at an elite level? It's get to the quarterback with 4 guys, with Chase Young, with Montez Sweat, with Daron Payne, with Jonathan Allen. That group is a top 5 group in the NFL. And so I'm just going to be watching the first couple series of that game. You could have a muddy track. We know how the field is at FedEx Field and how that's caused issues in the past. If it kind of becomes a sloppy game and they're able to muck it up a little bit, and the Bucs offense doesn't look great out of the gate, I could see Chase Young and that group up front for Washington making it a long, long night for Tom Brady.
We talked about, I had my top 5 people in the playoffs this weekend, or overall that I felt had pressure. I think there's some pressure on Bruce Arians. Tom's had a great success. Arians is not seen as a grinder like a Sean Payton or some of these playoff coaches. He's a little loose. Is there somebody for you in the playoffs, coach, quarterback, player, that you do feel, I thought it was Arians, maybe I'm wrong. Aaron Rodgers has a little, it's time to win at Lambeau, but who's facing pressure over the next several weeks to you?
Lamar Jackson, I think, this weekend. And look, he's been great through 3 years. We've seen some cracks this year. He was fantastic, obviously, MVP of the league last year. And I think when you're a young quarterback, you get a little bit of a pass, right? All right, year 1, year 2, if you have great seasons and then they end in your first playoff game, that's fine. I think if you lose in the first playoff game 3 years in a row, then it becomes a thing. And we're talking about going into an offseason now where the Ravens are going to have to make a decision on his 5th-year option. They're going to have to make a decision on extending him. And you look at how many guys have gotten extended after year 3 the last few years. Happened for Patrick Mahomes, happened for Deshaun Watson, happened for Carson Wentz, happened for Jared Goff. And so I just think you look at where Lamar Jackson is, and he's had an awesome first 3 years. There's no question about it. It looks like the Ravens hit a home run with that draft pick, but he hasn't won in the playoffs yet. And I think up until now, you could chalk it up to young player, isn't experienced in this stage. He'll get there. You lose 3 times in a row. I think that's where it sort of becomes a thing. And I can even remember all the way back to when this became a thing for Peyton Manning, right? It feels like we're getting there with Lamar Jackson. If he loses on Sunday to the Titans, I think now we're starting to talk about this as a little bit more of a trend. Can he win in the playoffs? So
there's a lot of head coaching openings. And many people feel that Jacksonville's a great opening with Trevor Lawrence. And my pushback would be, if you go look in college football or pro football, the markets that care about it, like Pittsburgh and Green Bay and New Orleans, where the fans demand excellence. They go to their talk radio. They write letters. The GM hears it. There's a kind of an environmental pressure in the South. If your coach can't beat Saban occasionally, even LSU, you fire him. Jacksonville's got so much apathy. It feels like a college football market that, they stayed with Doug Marrone forever. They stay with the GM. There's no pressure to get it right. So I don't view that just because of Trevor Lawrence is a great job. I like the Charger job. I think they're ready to win now. Is there one when your sources talk about 1 or 2 that are really attractive or unattractive?
Well, isn't their apathy in L.A. for the Chargers, Colin, by your same argument?
There is, but I would say this. There is, but the talent on the roster assembled by Telesco is so good that I think it's hard not to. I think you could ace back-to-back drafts in Jacksonville and not have the Chargers roster.
Right. So this is the way I would split it up then. I think for a coach, the Chargers opening might be the best opening because you want to win right away, right? Like, so if you're a head coach and I probably have 2 years to win in this environment before the temperature really turns up, I think the Chargers are a place you can win quickly with a few tweaks to the roster. You're right. They've got frontline talent, and it's hard to find cornerstones. They've got a lot of them. If Derwin James can stay healthy, he's in that category. Joey Bosa, Kenneth Murray, obviously the wideouts, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. We'll see what happens with Hunter Henry, Austin Eckler, and the big one, Justin Herbert. So for a coach, you want to go in and be able to win right away and establish your program the way like Sean McDermott did in Buffalo going to the playoffs in his first year. The Chargers are the best opening.
Yeah.
From a general manager standpoint, though, where you're looking at the big picture and it's a job where, you're the description of what you're supposed to do is look 5 years out. I think Jacksonville is absolutely the best one. You can build that thing up in your own image. You're going to get patience from the owner, which for a GM is very, very important. You've got multiple picks. It's not just Trevor Lawrence. You got multiple picks in the first, second, fourth, fifth, and seventh rounds. And you've got more cap space than anybody in the NFL with a couple of nice young pieces, CJ Henderson, Laviska Shenault, Josh Allen. And so the way I'd answer your question, I'd split it up, Colin, and maybe that's a little bit of a cop-out. But if you're a head coaching candidate, I think the Chargers are probably the best opening. I'm with you on that. If you're a GM candidate, I think the Jaguars opening is the best one.
In the NBA, if a star demands a trade, their CBA is very star player favorable. In the end, the logo for the NBA is a player. The logo for the NFL is a shield. So complaining quarterbacks, Aaron Rodgers and Big Ben, you get over it. Deshaun Watson may demand a trade. Is he different in that he has saved a rudderless franchise for 2 years, and he may have a case to be made?
I think he has a case to be made to be upset. Yeah. I mean, look, like he doesn't. I don't think any quarterback in the league can demand that their voice be heard in a head coach or a general manager's search, but this isn't what this is. Like he was told by the owner, Cal McNair told him, and Deshaun told me this 6 weeks ago. I was told by the owner that I'm going to be involved, that they're going to consult with me, that they're going to look to me for ideas. And so like, I know like he felt like the curveball where they had been looking at a handful of other candidates. There was almost like a no patriot rule as far as what they were going to do going forward. That curveball where all of a sudden now it's Nick Caserio out of nowhere. I know it caught him off guard. And on top of that, I think the other piece to this that you needed to pay attention to is not only did he feel like he was cut out of that, he didn't feel like he was listened to in general because the one guy that he had sort of pushed on ownership there said, I want you to take a look at Eric Bieniemy. He didn't demand that they look at that they hire Eric Bieniemy or anything like that. Just take a look at Eric Bieniemy, right? And the reason why is because he's good friends with Patrick Mahomes, and Patrick Mahomes called him up and said, this guy's legit. Come in and take a look at Eric Bieniemy. So it was never Deshaun saying you have to hire Eric Bieniemy. It was just take a look at Eric Bieniemy. They are the only team of the six with openings that hasn't interviewed Eric Bieniemy. And so I think the combination of the curveball, the Caserio curveball,